Hey everyone, in this video we're going to show you how to draw a walnut shell. So grab your pencils and let's get drawing. The first thing you want to do in drawing a walnut shell is just sort of establish where the shell is going to be. So in this case we'll kind of create it just like this, and we'll kind of go like that, and that will start to make the outline of the walnut shell. I'll give you some facts about walnuts as well. We did a walnut drawing already, so this is going to be the shell. I think the trick with the walnut is that in the center you kind of have this like half opening that exists just like that. So you kind of want to have that, and the part of the middle, this middle part actually for the most part is raised, so you might have this ridge like piece that is like this. Okay, now with the ridge you're going to have some of these areas over here. Now I want to move over to a 5B. So if we're going to draw the 5B, use the 5B, we're going to draw these ridges kind of like this, and we will fix them up, but for now they basically will sit like this, and that's one of them. Another like dark shadow might sit over here as a result of this ridge. So this ridge is starting to kind of look like this, right? So that's really what I'm getting at, is like creating this ridge-like shape. Over here, so typically around this part, this space typically gets bigger. So you might find just a little more distance from here to here. And around this part of the walnut shell, there's longer ridges. Up here, they tend to be just a little bit shorter. So I might not necessarily create as many ridges up at the top, right? So. So in reality, that's all I'm really doing, is just creating these ridge-like structures over here. And shortly we'll kind of create some lines that kind of go back to this piece as well. For now, I'll just put a few on. I'll give you some facts as well. So I said this in another video, but walnuts are one of the oldest tree foods known to mankind, dating back to 7,000 BC. So that's about 9,000 years ago. The other interesting fact is that the Romans called the walnuts juglans regia, so Jupiter's royal acorn, they used to call that. So kind of an interesting fact as well. So we're going to keep drawing this ridge as I kind of hinted at. The ridge is really interesting because it kind of gets to a point where you have this line that kind of goes back as well. So you kind of have these lines that kind of exist over here. So the trick with the walnut is like the lines kind of, you want them to take this shape, right? So that's kind of what we're drawing over here. This piece over here, you'll see kind of creates a ridge-like shape, and even this middle part over here, we might want it to fade out a little more over here, because there is this kind of ridge-like structure right over here. Okay. Let's fix up this part. There's too many close dark spots there, and it's kind of throwing off the drawing. I think what we really need is this piece over here to just look a little more natural. Like something was throwing me off. So if you're drawing and you want to just fix your drawing, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Just kind of saying, you know what, I want to reestablish some of this space, and just grab your eraser, okay? So in order for me to kind of fix this up, I want to create like a bit of a dark spot here. And I want these lines to kind of continue down as well. So and just like I did over here, I'm going to create another kind of ridge over here. Just like that. Notice the lighter parts kind of create this ridge-like structure. That's exactly what I'm trying to establish here. So we have some lines that exist over here. So another interesting fact about walnuts is that history actually shows that the English walnut actually came from ancient Persia, where they were reserved for royalty. So they say that that the walnut is known as the Persian walnut. It's kind of interesting fact there. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of creating this ridge-like structure, like I said, and that kind of starts to create the framework for this walnut shell, right? I might want to add some shadows on the side over here. And it's really easy to do that. Just get some shadows on the side if your light source is, perhaps over here or over here. Just add some shadows just on the kind of underside and the bottom side, right? That'll kind of create like the most realistic look to your walnut shell. Okay. Now, some of these dark spots should trickle down into creating a bit of a ridge, like down below. So you can actually do that by just kind of moving your pencil like, up and down a little bit. For me, like just shaking your hand a bit also creates a bit of a realistic effect as well. The outer part of the walnut shell can be a little jagged. If you look at a real walnut shell, there is a lot of like variation to it, so don't be afraid to create some of these jagged little ripples on the outside of the shell. So we're just going to keep at this. We're going to keep adding some shading around this side. Sometimes walnut shells have a bit of like specking to it, kind of around this part of the shell. So I'm just going to add some of these dots just around here, and we'll see if we can make it look as realistic as possible. Okay. The line in the middle still should be, pronounced and prominent and there. So don't let that, fade away too much. But what you might want to do is just add some thickness to it. The line in the middle is kind of the opening of the shell. So you might want to like even grab a ruler and just kind of go up and down and just create some thickness to it, maybe over here at the top. and just move your ruler from side to side as you need to perhaps go a little thinner down below. I think typically it's a little thicker at the opening at the top, if I'm not mistaken. So just like that. Now, we kind of started to create the structure of this piece over here, but there's something kind of missing, and that's kind of just some faint lines that might exist like this. So don't be afraid to just add in some of those lines, and you can also add in some of those lines just going down as well. They're kind of vein-like lines, and they kind of, you know, exist like this. So don't be afraid to just throw those on and smudge it out just a touch. Yeah, so this is like a bit of a ridge. Like you want to try your best to make this like a 3D looking ridge. So so this ridge could use a little bit of shadows on this side as well, and sometimes just on the side as well, just over here. Like the trick is just making it ever so slightly with some of these shadows, because you want it to look like, you know, a 3D piece, but you don't want it to look like you're adding too much shading where it's like it's just throwing it off, right? You kind of want to avoid that if you can. I do find that if you can make this a little more pronounced, like this shape, this line, you might find that these dark pieces do look a little more realistic. So don't be afraid to go back and just further create some of these dark areas as well. And I think you know where I'm gonna go with this. You can also grab a darker pencil type and just create some darker space in here as well. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this, right? One of the trickiest things about drawing a walnut is really some of these lines that you want to get on, and they end up going away if you smudge too much. So you can kind of see that happen to me, and I might want to just clean that up as well. So it's just a matter of being persistent and just keeping at it, and you know, keep it going until you're really starting to see some progress. I always say this too, that a lot of progress really comes in at the end. A lot of it really comes in, you know, once you're like almost done the drawing, and right before that, you're not really happy with it. It doesn't really look as good as you want. So that's kind of the frustrating thing, especially when drawing something like a walnut shell. So I'm gonna try to make sure that we're aware of that, right? So I'm gonna go back and just make sure that my shadows on the left side are to my liking. And as of right now, like, I'm not entirely happy with it, so I wanna just re-add some color to it, some tones, if you will. Okay. And I'll just quickly maybe grab an 8B and just add ever so slightly just some darker tones at the bottom. So just kind of like that. Being a little like abstract with it. I'm not going like the fine point or anything. I'm just kind of just in an abstract way, just trying to give this some tones, right? You know, even over here, that ridge was kind of throwing me off. So if you notice, I'm just kind of letting some of this lead kind of come back alive. And that's sort of what I'm doing here. So this is kind of the side of one side. We're going to make sure that our lines are still visible, and we're just going to do that by just literally throwing them on here, just making sure that they're there, and somewhat of a sporadic structure as well. So I'm just going to do that. Now, I think the trick here is just getting the other side done. All I'm really going to do is just mimic what I did on this side onto the other, but it's not going to be exact by any means. I'm really just going to try to make it, you know, somewhat like natural as well. And starting from the top down, you just kind of have some of these dark spots that, you know, somewhat exist. But when drawing these dark spots, you're just creating the ridge as well. And this ridge really exists kind of like that, right? So just make sure that you are aware of that, and we'll try to bring this all together. The ridge shouldn't be like just clear and white. You want to add some shadows to the ridge, so don't be afraid to do that. We'll fix this up after. And even on this side, you might feel like you want to just get a little more darkness on this side of the ridge as well. So gonna keep at it here. I'm gonna keep it going, keep it going. Some of this dark area could be pulled out just a little bit. Just kind of like that. And I still do think it's a good idea to just get some lines on this walnut. You know, walnuts have a lot of these lines, and you want to try your best to kind of follow the structure of the outer shape of the walnut if you're going to put on some of these lines, just like on the other side. Using my 5B, I'm just going to reestablish some of the shadowing over here. Now, in order to, you know, not make this look like it's out of place, I'm just going to add in, as I usually do, what I call pulling out the shadows just over there. So I'm just going to pull them out from the line, just move back out. Just so that line doesn't look like it's like a sore thumb, like it's sticking out. And if, just remember on the other side, the outer line could be a little jagged as well. It might look more realistic that way as well. So if you're gonna do that, just add some darker tones, maybe within, this is an 8B. So just add in just ever so slightly some darker tones down here. And you might find that it looks a lot more realistic as well. Use your smudge technique to kind of pull this all together. And just keep at it until you're happy. And then I would say, as we start to finish up this drawing, you know, just make sure that your little squiggly lines are still there. Some of them have started to kind of disappear. You can just like get them back in there as well. So they say that walnuts were actually traded along the Silk Road route, which is the route between Asia and the Middle East. And then caravans carried walnuts to far off areas, eventually through the sea, and spreading the popularity around the world. And that's kind of how, you know, this nut came to be. So walnuts really expanded that way and kind of grew in popularity through this, what they called the Silk Road route, which is really interesting. So we're starting to see this come together. I think there's just some areas that I'm not entirely thrilled with, which is like some of this shading over here and this ridge that we created. I would like to see that just looking a little more realistic. So if you can tell, I'm just kind of doing that, making sure that this, you know, the shadows pull up as well and kind of go back to this point, just like they do on that side, just to make a more realistic, like ridge, if you will. I keep calling it the ridge, that middle part, right? Another thing is those little dots. So some walnuts have some of these dots, and there's nothing wrong with just making sure that they're pretty visible as well. Okay. You can also like take some of these lines these squiggly lines and actually make some of them just a little bit thicker than others. That actually would create a bit of a sense of realism as well. And that's what I'm going to do here, just to make sure some of them are a little more visible. For example, right here, this one might, you know, we might feel like it looks a lot better. Just like with some lines to it. Another fact is that the English merchant marines transported the product for trade to ports around the world, and they became known as English walnuts because this English-based marine transported the product, which was really interesting. But they say like England, in fact, never grew walnuts commercially. So even though the English Marines kind of, or Marine unit, sorry, the English Marine unit transported them, England never actually carried the walnuts or produced them commercially, which is really interesting. So, interesting fact as well. I'm just going to make sure that the middle line is still visible. I've been doing just a bit of smudging on it, and I think it's starting to kind of, you know, bleed onto the drawing. So in doing so, I might just want to just bring out just a little more of this, and it's just like adding a little more lead to this just like further helps you just pull this together, doesn't it? So that's all I'm really doing here. And just like on this side I had some lines, I might feel like I can just have a couple more over on this side, for example, and I might have a couple more just over here. And I think that's something that was kind of missing here. Even this one over here could kind of go down, right? So you know, don't be afraid to get a little like random with it. Don't be afraid to just say, hey, I want, you know, like this area to be a little more darker, and you're creating ridges. Like what you're really doing is creating ridges around here. Some of these ups and downs and some of these pieces that look a little more like 3D, if you will. So that's really what we're creating over here. So that's actually why I wanted to keep at some of this shading. And I'm kind of using somewhat of a crosshatch method to bring out some of the shading. So you might see me doing that here as well. So, and I'm just going to keep doing this over here. So notice like the lines that I put on, I'm also going against the grain and just going side to side, side to side. This is also helping, you know, make it look a little more realistic. You don't want just lines everywhere. That's not exactly what I was trying to say before. You want some ridges, like you want some realistic tones to it as well. So we're starting to pull this all together. I would say like it's starting to look a lot better, and I'm certainly happy with where we're at right now. The last thing that you might want to do is grab a nice finer point, pencil as well, and just reestablish some of these lines that are probably missing at this point, and some of these fine lines that might exist might really help you make this look as realistic as possible. So I would say like a nice fine pencil will really help you do that. So we're basically going to do that and then finish off the drawing. So don't be afraid to just to have some of these lines, on there. Okay. So I think we're looking pretty good. I think at this point I'll wrap this up, but I'll say thank you so much for watching and have a great day.